Oh, your parents won't let you go.
No, it's just that they'll go with me. Everything I do, they're there. Supporting, encouraging, videotaping.
From the first American sitcom to film inside Soviet Russia to 32-year-old high schoolers graduating on screen, this beloved 1980s classroom comedy hid some truly bizarre secrets behind its wholesome facade. Two future entertainment moguls started here. An Oscar winner played a student years after Indiana Jones, and the show's star hated it so much he quit mid-run. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Head of the Class Fact 1, the oldest high school students on television.
As the heart grows older, will come to such sights colder. Gerard Manley Hopkins, spring and fall.
Is she a killer or what?
When Head of the Class premiered in 1986, audiences tuned in to watch a group of gifted teenagers navigate high school life in their honors program. But what viewers didn't realize was that some of these teenagers were pushing 30 years old in real life. Dan Frischman, who played the lovably nerdy Arvid Engen with his signature bow ties and squeaky voice, was actually 27 years old when he first stepped into the role of a high school sophomore. This age gap, while noticeable, became downright absurd by the time the series reached its finale 5 years later. When Arvid Engen finally graduated from high school in 1991, Frischman himself was 32 years old, still convincingly portraying a 17-year-old student walking across the stage to receive his diploma. This phenomenon, which fans and critics now refer to as Dawson casting, named after the famously age-inappropriate casting of Dawson's Creek in the late 90s, reached one of its most extreme examples with Head of the Class. Frischman wasn't alone in this predicament either, as several other cast members were also significantly older than their on-screen personas, creating a classroom full of adults pretending to be teenagers for half a decade. The casting choice was deliberate, as producers wanted experienced actors who could handle the witty, sophisticated dialogue written for these intellectually gifted characters. But it resulted in one of television's most glaring examples of 30-somethings sitting in high school desks and worrying about prom dates. Despite the obvious age difference, Frischman's performance was so endearing and authentic that audiences overlooked the fact they were watching a man in his 30s play a character young enough to be his own child. Fact 2. Two future Nickelodeon powerhouses started here.
Do you usually barge into a classroom like this?
I'm sorry, I have to give someone a message.
What message?
Well, it's kind of personal. Out in the hall would be better.
Head of the Class served as the launching pad for two young actors who would eventually reshape children's television and become some of the most powerful executives in Hollywood, though nobody could have predicted their meteoric rise while they were sitting in that fictional classroom. Dan Schneider played Dennis Blunden, the class clown and slacker who provided comic relief throughout the series, while Brian Robbins portrayed Eric Mardian, another one of the show's charismatic students. Both actors were competent performers during their time on Head of the Class, but their true talents lay behind the camera rather than in front of it. After the show ended in 1991, both men transitioned away from acting and began writing and producing television content, quickly discovering they had a gift for understanding what young audiences wanted to watch. Schneider became a titan of teen and preteen television, creating or co-creating some of Nickelodeon's most successful and beloved series, including All That, The Amanda Show, Drake and Josh, Zoe 101, iCarly, Victorious, and Sam and Cat. His shows dominated Nickelodeon's programming for nearly 2 decades and launched the careers of numerous young stars. Robbins took a different but equally impressive path, directing films and eventually moving into executive roles, ultimately becoming president and CEO of Nickelodeon in 2017, before being promoted to president and CEO of Paramount Pictures in 2021. The fact that two relatively minor cast members from an 80s sitcom would go on to control such massive portions of the entertainment industry is remarkable. And it all started with them playing high school students in that honors program classroom, learning the craft that would eventually make them two of the most influential figures in family entertainment. Fact 3. First American sitcom filmed in Soviet Russia.
Laurie and Barry made up. She's going to the dance with him. Oh, it's okay. I had a feeling we were drifting apart anyway.
In September of 1988, at the height of Cold War tensions when the Soviet Union was still very much intact and relations between the superpowers remained icy, the cast and crew of Head of the Class accomplished something no American television show had ever done before by traveling behind the Iron Curtain to film an episode. The two-part special titled Mission to Moscow saw 95 people from the production pack their bags and fly to the Soviet capital, where they would film scenes for what would become one of the most memorable and ambitious episodes in the series' entire run. This wasn't just a simple location shoot either, as the logistics of getting approval from Soviet authorities, transporting equipment, and coordinating with local officials required months of planning and diplomatic negotiation at a time when such cooperation between American and Soviet entities was rare and newsworthy. The storyline followed Charlie Moore and his honors students as they traveled to Moscow for an academic competition, giving the show an opportunity to showcase real locations throughout the Soviet capital, including Red Square, the Kremlin, and various Moscow landmarks that most American viewers had only seen in news footage or spy movies. The episodes aired during a unique moment in history as Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of glasnost and perestroika were beginning to open the Soviet Union to the West, and this television production became part of a larger cultural exchange between the two nations. For the cast, many of whom had never traveled internationally before, the experience was surreal and eye-opening as they witnessed firsthand a society and political system completely different from their own, while trying to maintain the comedic tone that defined their show, all while being watched closely by Soviet officials who had never hosted an American sitcom production on their soil. Fact 4. Mike Tyson traveled to Moscow too.
IHP?
Individualized honors program. Our principal, Dr. Samuels, doesn't like the subs to try and teach us. It's a waste of time.
Oh, really?
When the Head of the Class production traveled to Moscow in 1988 for their groundbreaking episodes, they had an unexpected and notably intimidating addition to their group, as heavyweight boxing champion Mike Tyson joined the trip to accompany his then-wife Robin Givens, who played the intelligent and sophisticated Darlene Merriman on the show. Tyson, who was at the absolute peak of his boxing career and considered the most feared fighter in the world at the time, found himself wandering around Soviet Moscow with a television crew, creating one of the most bizarre juxtapositions in entertainment history. The newly married couple, whose relationship was already showing signs of the turbulence that would soon make headlines worldwide, participated in various tourist activities during their time in the Soviet capital. They visited Lenin's tomb in Red Square, where the preserved body of the Soviet founder lay in state, a surreal experience for an American boxing champion and a sitcom actress. Perhaps most amusingly, they were photographed eating ice cream at a newly opened Baskin-Robbins location in Moscow, one of the first American franchises to open in the Soviet Union as part of the thawing Cold War relations. The sight of Mike Tyson, one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet, walking through Red Square drew massive crowds of curious Soviet citizens who gathered around the couple, fascinated by the presence of such famous Americans in their city. The juxtaposition of a violent sports icon accompanying his wife on a sitcom filming trip, all taking place in the heart of the communist world just a year before the Berlin Wall would fall, created a moment that perfectly captured the strange, transitional period of the late 80s, when the old world order was beginning to crumble and unusual cultural exchanges like this one became possible. Fact 5. The Moscow episodes had no laugh track.
I can't conceive of one person on my team who would be so irresponsible as to jeopardize our chances by going to a dance. See it practice.
Throughout its entire 5-season run from 1986 to 1991, Head of the Class maintained the traditional sitcom format that defined most comedies of that era, complete with a laugh track that cued audiences when jokes landed and helped establish the show's lighthearted, comedic tone. However, when the production team traveled to Moscow to film the ambitious two-part Mission to Moscow episodes in September of 1988, they made a creative decision that fundamentally changed the viewing experience and gave those episodes a dramatically different feel from every other installment in the series. The Moscow episodes were filmed and broadcast without any laugh track whatsoever, allowing the dramatic and cultural elements of the story to breathe without the artificial punctuation of canned laughter. This decision wasn't just an artistic choice, but rather a recognition that the subject matter and setting demanded a more serious, documentary-like approach that would have been undermined by the constant reminder that this was supposed to be a comedy. The absence of the laugh track transformed these episodes into something closer to a drama with comedic elements, allowing viewers to experience the fish-out-of-water scenarios and cultural clashes without being told when something was supposed to be funny. For regular viewers of the show who had become accustomed to the rhythmic pattern of joke, laugh that defined typical episodes, watching the Moscow installments felt almost eerie and disorienting, as if they were watching a completely different show that just happened to feature the same characters they'd grown to love. The tonal shift was so pronounced that some fans remember these episodes as the most memorable of the entire series, precisely because they broke from formula and treated the material with a gravitas that the show rarely attempted in its more conventional classroom-based episodes, creating a unique viewing experience that stood apart from everything else Head of the Class ever produced. Fact 6. An Oscar winner was a late addition.
I'm not stupid. I know why I'm overweight. It's anxiety.
During the 4th season of Head of the Class, which aired during the 1989 to 1990 television year, the show welcomed a new student to the honors program who was already more famous than most of his castmates, though his career had hit a lull since his childhood stardom. Ke Huy Quan, who went by the stage name Jonathan K. Quan at the time, joined the cast as Jasper Kwong, bringing with him an impressive resume that included 2 of the biggest adventure films of the 1980s. Just a few years earlier, Quan had captured audiences' hearts as Short Round, the brave and loyal sidekick to Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, delivering the iconic line, "No time for love, Dr. Jones," that became one of the film's most quotable moments. He followed that success by playing Data, the gadget-loving inventor in The Goonies, another beloved adventure classic that defined 80s childhood for an entire generation. However, like many child actors, Quan found fewer opportunities as he grew older, and Head of the Class offered him a chance to continue working in television during his teenage years. His character Jasper appeared throughout the show's final 2 seasons, though he never quite achieved the same level of prominence as the original cast members who had been there since the pilot. After Head of the Class ended, Quan largely stepped away from acting, unable to find roles that matched his childhood success in an industry that often struggles to cast Asian American actors in leading roles. He worked behind the scenes as a stunt coordinator and assistant director for years, seemingly resigned to the fact that his performing career was over. Then, in an extraordinary turn of events that nobody could have predicted, Quan returned to acting in 2022 with a stunning performance in Everything Everywhere. All at once, playing Waymond Wang with such depth and emotional resonance that he won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 2023, completing one of the most remarkable comeback stories in Hollywood history. Fact 7. Bill Cosby convinced Robin Givens to drop out before.
We'll be taking over IHP for the next couple of weeks until Mr. Thomas gets back. That is, if you want to.
Robin Givens became famous for playing the sophisticated and ambitious Darlene Merriman on Head of the Class. She was on a completely different path that would have taken her far away from Hollywood and into a very different kind of career altogether. Gibbons was a serious student pursuing a pre-med track at Harvard Medical School, one of the most prestigious and competitive medical programs in the entire world, with every intention of becoming a doctor and leaving the entertainment industry behind. However, her trajectory changed dramatically after she made a guest appearance on The Cosby Show in 1985, where she caught the attention of Bill Cosby himself, who was at the absolute height of his influence and power in the television industry at that time. Cosby, impressed by her natural charisma and screen presence, took it upon himself to mentor the young actress and convince her that she had a future in entertainment that was too promising to abandon for medicine. In conversations that would seem deeply ironic and troubling given what the world later learned about Cosby's character and behavior, he encouraged Gibbons to drop out of Harvard and pursue acting full-time, even making her an extraordinary promise to sweeten the deal and reduce the risk she was taking. Cosby told Gibbons that if she gave acting a serious shot and failed to make it within 2 years, he would personally pay her tuition to return to Harvard and complete her medical degree, essentially offering her a safety net that made the gamble seem more reasonable. Gibbons took his advice and left medical school, landing the role on Head of the Class shortly thereafter, which launched her into stardom and set her on the path that would define the rest of her life. While her acting career never reached the heights that Cosby may have envisioned, and her personal life became tabloid fodder due to her tumultuous marriage to Mike Tyson, the decision to leave Harvard and pursue entertainment fundamentally altered her destiny in ways both good and bad. Fact 8. The star hated the show.
What are you teaching my honors program today?
We're looking at the causes of the First World War.
You know anything about the First World War?
Sure, that's the one in black and white.
Howard Hesseman, the veteran character actor who starred as Charlie Moore, the cool and unconventional teacher at the heart of Head of the Class, had a very different vision for what the show was supposed to be when he signed on to lead the series, and his growing frustration with how it evolved became increasingly difficult for him to hide as the seasons progressed. Hesseman, best known for his role as radio DJ Johnny Fever on the classic sitcom WKRP in Cincinnati, agreed to star in Head of the Class with the understanding that the show would focus primarily on his character and his teaching methods, with the students serving as supporting players in stories about education and mentorship. However, as the show developed and the network executives saw audience research indicating that viewers were more interested in the diverse ensemble of student characters than they were in the teacher, the creative direction shifted dramatically. The focus moved away from Charlie Moore's unconventional teaching philosophy and increasingly spotlighted the students' personal dramas, romantic entanglements, and comedic situations, relegating Hesseman to more of a supporting role in what was supposed to be his star vehicle. This shift infuriated the actor, who felt betrayed by the producers and network executives who had promised him one kind of show and delivered something completely different. By 1989, Hesseman was openly complaining to reporters about his dissatisfaction, telling them bluntly that, "We're not doing the show that I was led to believe I'd do," and making it clear that he felt misled about the creative direction. His unhappiness became so pronounced that it created tension on set and made contract negotiations increasingly difficult. When his original contract expired at the end of the 4th season, Hesseman decided he'd had enough and chose not to renew, leaving the series despite it being a steady paycheck and a high-profile role, because he simply couldn't continue doing a show that he felt had betrayed its original premise and wasted his talents as a comedic actor. Fact 9. Billy Connolly's failed spin-off series.
I became a hit lady for the mob, and then I married a hitman, and then we ended up having contracts on each other.
When Howard Hesseman departed Head of the Class at the end of the 4th season due to his well-documented frustration with the show's direction, the producers faced a significant challenge in finding someone who could step into the role of teacher and authority figure for the honors program students without simply trying to recreate what Hesseman had done. Their solution was to bring in Billy Connolly, the wildly popular Scottish comedian known for his profane stand-up routines and his distinctive Glaswegian accent, to play Billy McGregor, a completely different kind of teacher with a very different personality and approach. Connolly's character was supposed to inject new energy into the show's 5th and final season, offering a fresh perspective and a new dynamic with the students, but the casting also came with higher ambitions from the network executives who saw potential for something bigger. The character of Billy McGregor was developed with the intention of giving him his own spin-off series, and in 1992, after Head of the Class had concluded its run, that spin-off premiered with the straightforward title of Billy. The premise followed McGregor as he left the high school teaching environment behind and moved to California to start a new chapter in his life, though the specific details of what he was doing and why viewers should care were never quite clear or compelling enough to hook audiences. The show struggled from the beginning, never finding its footing or developing the kind of distinctive voice that would have set it apart from other sitcoms crowded into the network schedule. Despite Connolly's considerable charm and comedic talents, Billy failed to connect with viewers and was canceled after just 13 episodes, making it one of the least successful spin-offs in television history and ending any hopes that the Head of the Class universe could extend beyond the original series that had inspired it. Fact 10. Dan Frischman, lead about his age.
Yeah, well, you have fun. I'm splitting, man. Later.
Once every 20 years with Eric is a lot.
The story of Dan Frischman's age deception goes even deeper than just the disparity between his real age and the teenage character he portrayed on Head of the Class, revealing a common but rarely discussed practice in Hollywood where actors routinely subtract years from their real age to remain eligible for roles that would otherwise go to younger performers. Frischman's actual birth date is 1959, which would have made him far too old to be considered for the role of a high school student when Head of the Class was being cast in 1986. But his official biographical information in industry databases and publicity materials consistently listed his birth year as 1964 instead, shaving a full 5 years off his real age. This wasn't an accidental error or a case of sloppy record-keeping, but rather a deliberate strategy encouraged by his agent early in his career when Frischman was trying to establish himself as an actor in Hollywood's youth-obsessed industry. The logic was simple and ruthlessly practical. If casting directors thought Frischman was 5 years younger than he actually was, he would remain eligible for teenage and young adult roles for significantly longer, extending his potential career window and increasing the number of auditions he could attend. The deception worked remarkably well, allowing Frischman to land the role of Arvid Engen and play a teenager on national television while he was actually pushing 30 years old. Even more impressively, the false birth date persisted in official records and online databases for decades after Head of the Class ended, meaning that many sources still incorrectly list his age to this day. The practice of age falsification was and remains relatively common in Hollywood, where actors understand that being perceived as younger can mean the difference between working steadily and watching opportunities dry up, though few cases are as extreme or as successful as Frischman's 5-year subtraction that allowed him to play a high school student well into his 30s. Fact 11. The school changed names. Mid-series.
The fourth letter of both words is a T, which gives us matching combinations of H, H, R, R, T, T, which when said quickly sounds like hurt. And that's the connection. When it comes to history, the truth hurts.
For the first 4 seasons of Head of the Class, from 1986 through 1990, the gifted students in the Individualized Honors Program attended Monroe High School, a name that was referenced consistently throughout episodes and became the established setting for all the classroom scenes and school-related storylines that defined the show. Then, without much fanfare or explanation, something strange happened when the show returned for its 5th and final season in the fall of 1990. The school was suddenly and inexplicably called Millard Fillmore High School, named after the 13th President of the United States, who served from 1850 to 1853, and is generally considered one of the more forgettable presidents in American history. For viewers who had been watching the show since the beginning, this sudden name change was confusing and jarring, as it seemed to contradict 4 years of established continuity without any clear reason for the alteration. The show did attempt to provide some in-universe explanation for the change, with dialogue indicating that the Monroe High School building was scheduled to be torn down, and that the students and faculty were being transferred to Millard Fillmore High School. But this explanation raised more questions than it answered. Why would the school building be demolished while classes were still in session? Why didn't this major event become a significant storyline rather than just a throwaway explanation? The real reason for the name change remains somewhat mysterious, though it likely had to do with behind-the-scenes production decisions, possibly related to licensing issues or a desire by the new creative team to establish their own identity for the final season. The change to Millard Fillmore High School came at the same time as other major shifts in the show, including Billy Connolly replacing Howard Hesseman as the teacher, suggesting that the producers wanted to signal a fresh start and distance the final season from what had come before, even if it meant creating continuity confusion for longtime fans who had to accept that their favorite characters now attended a completely different school. Fact 12, a novelization with a dating error.
You're saying what those so-called reporters, Woodward and Bernstein, did to Mr. Nixon was clearly irresponsible. And well, let's face it, shabby.
In 1989, when Head of the Class was at the peak of its popularity and airing its 3rd season, publishers decided to capitalize on the show's success by releasing a novelization that would allow fans to experience the series in a different format and take the characters home with them in a way that went beyond simply watching the television broadcast. The book was written by Susan Beth Pfeffer, an accomplished author of young adult fiction who had written numerous novels throughout the 1970s and 80s, and it ran to 120 pages of story that attempted to capture the humor and heart of the television series in prose form. The novelization took an interesting approach to its source material by combining elements from 6 different episodes into one continuous narrative, weaving together storylines and character moments from multiple installments of the show to create a cohesive plot that worked as a standalone story for readers who might not have seen every episode. This technique allowed Pfeffer to cherry-pick the best moments and most compelling storylines from the show's first few seasons, while creating something that felt fresh rather than just a straight adaptation of a single episode. However, despite the care taken in crafting the narrative and selecting which episodes to draw from, the book contained a glaring factual error that any dedicated fan of the show would have immediately noticed. The novelization incorrectly credited the pilot episode, titled First Day, as having been made in 1988, when in reality the episode had premiered in September of 1986, a full 2 years earlier than the book claimed. This mistake was particularly puzzling because it would have been easy to verify the correct date, as the show was still actively airing when the book was published, and any basic research would have revealed the error. The dating mistake suggests that either Pfeffer or the book's editor wasn't particularly familiar with the show's history, or didn't prioritize accuracy in the details, focusing more on creating an entertaining story than ensuring all the factual information about the series was correct. Fact 13. TV Guide. Mock the cast's ages.
When I'm alone, I don't bother with the candles. I might have a lesser wine.
Oh, I think we should let this breathe.
No. You have to be a blonde to drink this.
By the time Head of the Class reached its series finale in June of 1991, after 5 seasons of following these supposedly teenage students through their high school years, the disconnect between the actors' real ages and the characters they portrayed had become so obvious and ridiculous that even mainstream media outlets couldn't resist pointing it out. TV Guide, the most widely read television publication in America at the time, with millions of subscribers who treated it as the definitive authority on all things related to television programming, decided to acknowledge the elephant in the room when they covered the show's final episode. In their write-up about the series finale, where the students would finally graduate from high school and move on to college or careers, TV Guide included a sarcastic comment that perfectly captured how absurd the situation had become. The publication noted that it was nice to see a bunch of 30-year-olds graduate, a tongue-in-cheek observation that drew attention to the fact that most of the actors playing these high school seniors were actually well into their late 20s and early 30s in real life. The comment was particularly cutting because it was true, as Dan Frischman was 32, and several other cast members were similarly aged, far beyond the teenage years they were supposed to be portraying. The fact that TV Guide felt comfortable making this joke in print suggests that the show's unrealistic casting had become something of an open secret in the industry and among viewers, a running joke that everyone acknowledged, but that the show itself never addressed or attempted to explain. The sarcasm also reflected a broader trend in television criticism during the early 1990s, when media outlets were becoming more willing to point out the artificiality and absurdities of television conventions that audiences had simply accepted for decades without question, including the long-standing practice of casting adults to play teenagers in high school shows. Fact 14. Real IHP program inspired the show.
Yeah, you know, in a few years, computers will take us to places like Jupiter.
Yes, and my baggage will be on Mars.
While Head of the Class was a fictional sitcom with scripted storylines and comedic situations, the core concept of the show was actually rooted in reality and based on a real educational program that existed in Los Angeles and served genuinely gifted students in the local school system. The individualized honors program that served as the setting for the series was modeled after an actual IHP that operated at Walter Reed Middle School in Los Angeles, where advanced students were grouped together and given specialized curriculum designed to challenge them beyond what regular classes could provide. This real program used many of the same teaching philosophies and approaches that were depicted in the fictional version on television, including an emphasis on critical thinking, individualized attention, and allowing students to progress at their own pace, rather than being held back by standardized curriculum requirements. The connection between the real program and the television show became even more interesting when considering that Christine Haji, who played Simone Foster throughout the entire run of Head of the Class, was herself a genuine graduate of that actual IHP at Walter Reed Middle School before she became an actress. Haji brought first-hand experience of what it was like to be in a gifted program to her role, understanding the social dynamics, the academic pressure, and the unique challenges that came with being labeled as one of the smart kids. Her personal history with the program likely informed her performance and gave her character an authenticity that might have been harder to achieve if she had been trying to imagine what such an environment was like without having lived through it herself. The fact that the show drew from real educational practices rather than inventing everything from scratch gave it a grounding in reality that helped audiences connect with the characters and situations, even when the storylines became more comedic or exaggerated for entertainment purposes. Fact 15. The co-creators were writing cast members.
Well, I think that what Mr. Moore is saying is that for the sake of efficiency, well, we're losing a little bit of our humanity.
Exactly. Thank you, Simone.
But you're wrong.
The transformation of Dan Schneider and Brian Robbins from actors into television writers and producers didn't happen after Head of the Class ended, but rather began while they were still starring on the show and learning the craft of television production from the inside. During the second season, which aired in the 1987 to 1988 television year, both Schneider and Robbins made their writing debuts by co-writing an episode together titled Will the Real Arvid Engen Please Stand Up?, a story that centered around Dan Frischman's nerdy character and allowed the two young actors to put their own comedic sensibilities on screen. This collaborative writing effort marked the beginning of what would become one of the most successful partnerships in television production, as Schneider and Robbins discovered they had complementary skills and a shared understanding of what made comedy work for young audiences. The experience of writing for a show they were also starring in gave them unique insights into how television production worked from both sides of the camera, learning about script structure, character development, joke writing, and the collaborative process of taking a script from page to screen. They could see how their words were interpreted by directors and performed by their castmates, getting immediate feedback on what worked and what didn't in ways that writers who never appeared on screen couldn't experience. This hands-on education in television writing, while simultaneously acting in the show, created a foundation for their future careers that would eventually see both men become massively successful creators and producers. Schneider would go on to create or co-create more than a dozen successful series, while Robbins would transition from writing and directing into executive roles that put him in charge of entire networks. The fact that their journey from actors to industry powerhouses began with a single episode written during their time on Head of the Class demonstrates how the show served as an incubator for talent that would shape children's television for decades to come.